When we talk about Australia, we are talking about an enormous continent. A vast landmass stretching over more than 7.5 million square miles, an area that gives you the feeling that the possibilities there are limitless. But the truth is that size is not everything. Behind these breathtaking natural landscapes lies a silent crisis that is slowly devouring the continent. The land in Australia is dying. The soil is eroding. Winds and water are stripping away the fertile top layer. And salinity has begun to invade the land to the point where even the germination of a single seed has become almost impossible. Can you imagine the scale of this disaster? The numbers reveal that more than half of Australia's agricultural land requires immediate rehabilitation before it permanently loses its productive capacity. To put this into perspective, while the global rate of soil degradation in 2022 was around 22%, the figure in Australia reached nearly 2/3 of the country's total area. Yes, an entire continent is threatened by complete desertification. Yet, as in every great story, a solution emerges from the most unexpected place, not from advanced laboratories or complex technologies, but from a simple creature that has accompanied humans for thousands of years: sheep. Yes, sheep. So how did their wool transform from a traditional product into a genuine source of hope for saving dying lands? And how did this calm animal become part of Australia's battle against soil degradation? This is what we'll explore in today's video. All right, before we dive into the rest of this, if you're new here, consider subscribing. And if you like what you're seeing, hit that like button. It seriously helps the channel a ton. Take a close look at this map. The darker the color, the greater the number of sheep in that country. Up to our current year, 2025, we may be used to China breaking records across the board. But here, it surprises us once again. China alone possesses an army of 194 million sheep, roaming pastures and fields like a moving sea of wool swaying with the wind. India comes next with 75 million, followed by Australia with 70 million sheep. But why does Australia insist on maintaining such a massive number? The most important reason is that sheep in Australia are not merely animals. They are a national asset and a powerful economic engine. Between 2024 and 2025, Australia exported approximately 657,000 tons of mutton, astonishing figure that, believe it or not, represents a 50% increase compared to exports just 10 years earlier. What is truly remarkable here is not only the volume, but the efficiency. Australian sheep farms produce quantities equivalent to 5 to 10 times what the rest of the world produces per single hour of labor. Despite the fact that labor costs in Australia are 10 times higher than in competing countries such as China, we are talking about extreme precision and advanced technology that have turned sheep farming into a highly professional industry. Yet this story goes far beyond the language of numbers and economics. Let us talk about the other side of the story. Imagine walking through the Australian wilderness and suddenly spotting, from a distance, a massive woolly shape in motion. At first glance, you might not know what it is, but as you draw closer, you discover that it is simply a sheep. There are cases of sheep that lost their way or lived in the wild for years, like the one you are seeing now. Its wool had never been shorn throughout its life, and no one took care of it. Until the weight of its wool coat alone reached 20 kilograms, it is worth noting that it was not old. It had been roaming alone for only 6 years. There is another sheep that became a global sensation when the weight of its wool reached a staggering figure, nearly 35 kilograms. These cases led scientists to ask, what is the true capacity of these animals to produce wool? And how does such a simple creature turn into a mobile factory? On average, a sheep lives for about 13 years. And throughout this journey, it can produce an amount of wool equal to twice what wild animals produce. Experts estimate that a single sheep can provide between 50 and 70 kilograms of wool over its lifetime. Now, close your eyes and imagine. With 70 million sheep in Australia, how enormous is the volume of wool emerging from this continent? The truth is that Australia alone produces about 45% of the world's total wool output. But the issue is not quantity alone. It is the unmatched quality. The entire secret lies in the Australian Merino breed. These sheep, brought by settlers from southern Africa in the late 18th century, managed to adapt to Australia's harsh conditions and today produce the finest and softest wool on Earth. Premium natural fiber, whose delicacy no synthetic thread can rival. But as the saying goes, not everything that glitters is gold. The reality is not always rosy. The wool industry is currently facing a real crisis due to price volatility. After wool prices peaked in 2018 and 2019, global demand declined suddenly. Today, prices fluctuate around 1,200 Australian dollars per 100 kilograms, a figure far removed from the years of prosperity. Here, farmers found themselves facing a dilemma. Either store the wool in warehouses and wait for a miracle that would raise prices, a very costly option, or simply get rid of it and discard it to avoid further losses. But necessity is the mother of invention, and Australians did not stand idly by as this wealth went to waste. Instead of allowing wool to become waste in scrapyards, a brilliant idea emerged that turned the situation upside down. They found a way to use this wool to save their degraded lands. But how? Some companies have already begun feeding excess wool into massive machines that process it into environmentally friendly wool pellets. These pellets are used just like conventional fertilizers. They are spread into the soil, where they act as a water reservoir and a rich source of nutrients, gradually restoring life to dead land. In this way, wool was transformed from a financial burden into an environmental savior. Many Australian companies began to realize that the solution did not lie in chemical laboratories, but in sheep's wool, and they launched large-scale production of what are known as wool pellets. These pellets are not merely a technical innovation. They are a protective shield against Australia's greatest enemy, drought. And drought here is not just a passing word. We all remember the devastating bushfires that swept across the continent between 2019 and 2020. Ignited by the worst drought in modern history. Imagine that the city of Sydney received only 20 millimeters of rainfall over a long period, while temperatures soared to 40 degrees Celsius. The result was scorched forests and charred agricultural land. The question then becomes, how will Australia confront this dark future? The answer lies in those tiny pellets. Imagine wool pellets capable of absorbing up to 20 times their own weight in water, then releasing it gradually according to the soil's needs, like a smart sponge that nourishes the land in times of extreme stress. And although this is not a magical solution that completely ends drought, it has indeed brought greenery back to areas that were once considered geologically dead. And the benefits do not stop at water alone. The surprising fact is that wool decomposes very slowly over a period of 6 months, and during this time, it gently nourishes the soil. Wool is extremely rich in elements. It contains 50% carbon and about 15% nitrogen, in addition to sulfur, calcium, and magnesium. It is, in effect, a complete meal for plants that does not harm them as harsh chemical fertilizers often do. In addition to this, these pellets improve soil porosity. What does that mean? Quite simply, they give plant roots space to breathe and grow strong and healthy, while at the same time preventing the spread of small enemies such as snails and certain other organisms. Despite their harmless appearance, snails are among the most dangerous enemies of farmers. But here, the woolly magic comes into play. When wool pellets surround plants, they create a protective barrier that snails cannot cross, not because wool is toxic, but because its fibers contain microscopic barbs that cause irritation to these creatures, forcing them to retreat immediately from our precious plants. Have you ever heard of the term mulch or organic ground cover? Simply put, it is a material that farmers spread around the base of a plant to protect it from water evaporation and to prevent the growth of weeds. In Australia, however, farmers decided to raise the bar. They did not use straw or wood. Instead, they used sheep's wool as an enhanced cover. It is not just a cover, but a personal bodyguard for plants, nourishing and protecting them at the same time. Let us talk numbers and astonishing results. Take Australian plums as an example, a crop that generates around $67 million annually. Farmers conducted a unique experiment. They placed wool liners mixed with cornstarch around plum trees in extremely poor soil. The result? Production jumped by 37%. And that was not all. The size, weight, and nutritional value of the fruit improved by nearly 50%. The same success was repeated with strawberries, proving that wool is truly an elixir of life. In a harsh and unforgiving environment, this wool cover functions like a natural air conditioner. During scorching summer days, it reduces temperature fluctuations between night and day by up to 5 degrees, providing plants with a stable and calm environment in which to grow, away from weather shocks. But did the idea stop there? Of course not. The search for solutions went even further to blankets. Yes, wool blankets that we might leave in our homes to gather dust are, in Australia, being transformed when made of 100% natural wool into a complete organic fertilizer. Researchers carried out a brilliant experiment. They mixed wool with food waste and placed the mixture into special mesh systems, adding carbon sources and turning it weekly to simulate home composting. The result was a high-quality compost that recycles everything from old clothing to food scraps, ultimately returning it to the soil as nourishment for trees. The process did not stop at simple household experiments. This new organic compost was sent to laboratories to verify its quality, and the results were astonishing by every measure. Analyses confirmed that this compost fully meets Australian standards. It is not merely a soil conditioner. It is royal food for plants, containing an ideal balance of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, along with rare minerals such as zinc, copper, and iron. Imagine this scene with me: old wool sweaters that no one wears anymore, and forgotten grandmotherly blankets are no longer waste. They have been transformed into thriving community gardens, producing healthy, nutrient-rich food. It is a smart and remarkably simple plan that managed to harness natural resources that would otherwise have been wasted. But the greatest surprise is that wool does not always require complex processing. Imagine plant roots growing directly on raw wool fibers themselves, just as you are hearing it. Wool itself can serve as a growth medium without any additional steps, making the cultivation of lands that were once impossible to restore a reality today. And because Australian ambition knows no limits, some companies posed a brilliant question. Why not take all these benefits of wool and turn them into a liquid? This is how liquid wool fertilizer emerged. This innovation is not just a crazy idea. It is a highly practical solution for farmers. It is easy to store in bottles or containers and does not require special tanks. Most importantly, it can be sprayed onto soil and crops using conventional agricultural equipment, delivering all the magic of wool deep into the ground within seconds. The benefits go far beyond simple fertilization. Liquid wool fertilizer is rich in amino acids, which act as natural stimulants that help plants resist stress, strengthen their root systems, and activate their own defenses against diseases. It also enhances the efficiency of photosynthesis and attracts water molecules, helping the soil retain moisture for as long as possible. In short, the land becomes more fertile, plants grow stronger, and wool that was once considered worthless is transformed into liquid gold that supports sustainable agriculture. The only exception is that this liquid fertilizer does not combat snails. As it lacks the sharp fibers mentioned earlier, nevertheless, it remains an ideal solution for saving millions of acres from desertification. In the end, Australia's story with sheep tells us that the solutions to our greatest environmental challenges may be right in front of our eyes. And so, wool once again proves that it is not merely a garment that keeps us warm, but a global environmental tool. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.